Good morning, everyone. So this week we're going to be talking about empathy. And the story that I'm going to read this week is adapted from a website of an organization called No More Deaths. And it's a story told by Jeffrey Bear. And this organization, No More Deaths, volunteers with this organization distribute jugs of water to people primarily from Mexico and Central America that are trying to cross the border into the United States. And because it's such a desert sort of area, thousands of people have died while trying to make this attempt. So these volunteers are some of the people working to end these deaths by advocating for a more humane immigration system, but while also trying to meet the basic needs of those crossing the border by doing things like providing water for them. So this story that I'm about to read you is one day in the lives of volunteers with No More Deaths. The July sun beat down, and by mid-morning, there was no avoiding the heat. By 10 a.m., the anticipation rose with the heat as nearly 40 humanitarian volunteers gathered in a parking lot just outside the small desert town of Arivaca. The goal was simple. With 110-degree heat predicted for the coming weekend, we came to put jugs of water out for the migrants. The trails we hoped to cover were on the Buenos Aires National Wildlife Refuge. The refuge starts at the border and extends 30 miles north in one of the most active migrant quarters in Arizona. We arrived at the first water drop after a short drive west. Our caravan stretched up and down both sides of the road, and our first three volunteers, with gallon jugs in hand, started up the trail amidst applause by onlookers. Soon after, U.S. Fish and Wildlife agents arrived and followed them up the trail. Several minutes went by before our volunteers returned, followed by the agents carrying out the jugs. One by one, the water droppers were called over and cited for littering. The group included a nurse, a retired professor of social work, and a Presbyterian minister. We drove on to the next water stop with law enforcement vehicles now in the caravan. Reverend Fife, a resident of Cascabel and a Hamilton College student, took their jugs up and placed them on another migrant trail. But the Fish and Wildlife agents immediately confiscated the water and again issued citations for littering. We continued west to the third location, which is quite a distance off and required some hiking. Upon our arrival, we found that our expert in mapping and GPS was also ticketed for littering, but in his case for giving guidance to the trailheads. The contrast between the two options for water that day were striking. So a gallon of clean water, pure drinking water on the one hand, or a muddy pool of day-old rainwater was the only other option for these migrants. Four more volunteers, including a preschool teacher and a librarian, placed water along the trail, this clean water, as onlookers pleaded with the agents to leave the water there and not remove it. Please don't take that water. There are women and children dying out here. Then solemn chanting began as the agents moved to their trucks, emphasizing each word. No more deaths, no more deaths. But the message fell on deaf ears as agents for the third time immediately removed all the water and gallons of water and wrote 4 more citations. As the summer sun continued to bear down on us, we arrived at our final planned stop. A Franciscan priest and the retired clinical psychologist proceed to the last water drop. But certainly not the least. With abundant enthusiasm, they ducked under barbed wire to place desperately needed water jugs on known migrant routes, only to be met and cited, just like all the other volunteers had. After nearly 4 hours, we gathered again, this time on the side of the road, to celebrate the courageous resistance of people of conscience and the communities that stand with them. As our caravan departed mid-afternoon, we left hopeful and still committed, yet at the same time saddened as dozens of life-giving jugs of water sat confiscated as evidence of a crime in the back of a truck instead of on the migrant trails where they were so desperately needed. We also left burdened by the knowledge that as the weekend desert temperatures reached 112 degrees, we would soon hear the news of the next unnecessary deaths that will undoubtedly come. Indeed, as our migrant brothers and sisters continue on this journey, forced to cross in more dangerous areas, we must keep the resolve to continue this work by their side. So that is the story. So what do you think about that? Huh? So the volunteers are helping people that desperately need this water, right? They might die otherwise, but the people they're helping are breaking the law, right? So these migrants, it's illegal to be crossing the border like that. So is it right for these volunteers to be helping them? Are they helping them break the law? So what do you think about the actions of volunteers? I mean, I would say they're trying to save lives. They're trying to provide water. So it's a humanitarian act of kindness. So something to think about. Another thing is that, so here the whole point of this day was to get clean, fresh drinking water to the migrants. And yet all of the water was confiscated. So, but they went home feeling hopeful. How could they be hopeful if they didn't actually accomplish their task? Do you think their actions were meaningless since they weren't able actually to provide the water to the migrants in the end on that particular day? Or do you think they accomplished something, even though they didn't get the water there? Do you think there was something that happened? Do you still think it was worthwhile? And do you think it had meaning? So, and if so, how did it have meaning? And have you ever been unsuccessful in righting a wrong? Have you tried to do something and it didn't work? And what did it feel like? And did you try again? I bet, hopefully, if it didn't work out, you tried again, and then maybe it worked the next time. And if you try to right a wrong and it is unsuccessful, well, maybe it will give you more. I know when that's happened to me, I just get all the more determined to do something. So it didn't work the first time. So then it's like, all right, now I'm really going to try even harder and make it happen, find a way to get that water to the migrants. And then when I try again, I'm able to make it happen and feel all the better. So these migrants are considered illegal immigrants, right? That's the word that they're called. So I want to talk a little bit about language. What comes to mind when you hear the word illegal? It definitely has a negative connotation, right? You think of bad things, illegal things that aren't supposed to happen. And a lot of people use the term illegal immigrant for describing people who cross the border from Mexico into the United States. But can a human being be illegal? Illegal is something that is usually used to describe an action, right? It's illegal to steal, go into a store, swipe something. That's illegal. It's an action. Illegal is something that by definition, it's breaking the law, which is an action. So how can a person be illegal? By calling people illegal immigrants, sort of takes away some of their dignity because it's implying that it makes them less human somehow by saying they're illegal. So another way to talk about these migrants that are crossing the border from Mexico and the United States, their actions, yes, their actions are illegal. That's true. But they as a person are not illegal. So another term you can use is undocumented immigrants. And what about the word aliens? Sometimes people who are undocumented immigrants are called aliens. And that also has a whole different sort of negative connotation, right? Because you think about outer space and weird and crazy. So when you say aliens, it makes them sound so foreign. And by saying aliens, it makes them sound other, right? It's like, this isn't us. This is somewhere else that's weird and different. And hence, we don't want them here. So you say alien, and it's implying so much more than that word itself. By saying undocumented immigrants, that's just reality. You're just saying what it is, who they are, as opposed to putting values, whether positive or negative, on those words. I recently listened to a interview where, this was fascinating to me, I'd never thought of this, where a woman was talking, they're talking about slavery, and the woman said she never uses the term slaves because it implies that's who they are. What she uses for slavery, she says enslaved, those who were enslaved people. Because she said by saying someone is a slave, it's saying that is who they are. That is their person. They are a slave. That is what they are. But that's not what they are. It's something that was done to them, right? Just like a person can't be illegal. Slaves, it defines them. By someone saying someone was a slave, it defines them that way. As opposed when you, it's a subtle difference, but I think you guys can get it because you're smart. When you say someone is enslaved, it's something that was done to them. So instead of defining them, it's something that happened to them. So using those terms differently, if you say someone is a slave, it sort of takes a little bit away of their humanity, right? Because it's saying this is what they are, who they were, as opposed to, okay, here's this person that had value in themselves, whatever it might be, whoever that person was, and a person that was enslaved. Another thing you can think about is in terms of the terms handicapped and disabled. So remember watching we did the lesson on the people who were painting with their mouths and toes, and they created this incredible artwork using their mouth and toes. And they weren't, when you say disabled, it implies they are less able than the rest of us, but clearly they have way more talent. That particular group of people that we saw, those artists, had way more talent than I do. They certainly weren't less able than I, or handicap also has that same connotation or association of saying there's something lacking, right? But there isn't. They just have different skills. So that's why you can use the word differently abled instead of disabled. So why does this matter, right? Some people will just say, oh, that's just PC, that's political correctness, and it's just trying to make, you're just saying that just it makes yourself feel better, right? We use these PC terms just to make ourselves feel better. But the thing is, it does matter because it matters, it affects how we think about certain people. And when you're trying to affect social justice, it's really all about how, as individuals and humans, and as a society, how we view the world, right? It's great to change laws and regulations to make things more fair and to get rid of oppression. But even if you change those laws and regulations, if people are still thinking in the same old ways and they haven't changed the way they think, then you've made some change, but you haven't made real change. In the end, you have to really get people, if it's okay, or if people are still, there's people still that say, okay, well, I guess I have to let this Black person into my restaurant because that's the law. I'm not able to keep them out. But if they're thinking Black lives don't matter, then really, then we haven't affected the change we need to. And so when you're talking about, when you use certain words, it affects how we think about people. So by using the term illegal immigrants, you are putting in people's heads, your own head too, and other people's heads that you're talking to, that these migrants are somehow illegal and you're taking away their humanity. And same thing by, using the term slave versus enslaved, or disabled versus differently abled. You say disabled and you're putting it out there that there is something inherently wrong with this person and lesser about that person. So when you talk in this way, it puts it in your own head and others that is a situation, and it makes it all the harder to think about the humanity of these people that they share, that are just as human as the rest of us. So the point is that words do matter. And by thinking about language and the words that you use is a way to empathize with these oppressed groups of people, and one little way that you can affect social justice and positive change in this world. So that is it for this week. I hope you have a wonderful week. It's looking like we're going to have much better weather in the coming week ahead, so I'm excited about that. And I will see you next time. Stay safe and be kind.